Beneath the surface of human behavior, ambition and longing lies a current that pulses with immense power. It is not merely biological, though it animates the body. Nor is it purely emotional, though it stirs the heart. This current is libido, the primal life force from which both desire and destiny arise. It is sexual energy in its original, undivided form, untamed, undirected, and full of potential. Before it is labeled as lust, before it is judged, tamed, or denied, it is simply energy, vital, raw, and creative. Every mythic tradition speaks of this force. It is the serpent coiled at the base of the spine in esoteric traditions, the sacred fire stolen from the gods, the spark that ignites worlds. It is the fire Prometheus steals, the breath that animates Adam, the divine impulse that separates chaos from cosmos. In all these images, there is a common thread. Something primal is awakened and used to shape something greater than itself. In ordinary consciousness, however, this energy tends to flow along the path of least resistance. It seeks pleasure, conquest, possession, external gratification. In that state, it is lust, not in a moral sense, but in the sense that it is undifferentiated. It does not yet know what it wants to become. It is heat without direction, hunger without purpose. Many remain trapped at this level, confusing the temporary satisfaction of the body with the deeper fulfillment of the soul. But the energy itself is neutral. It is not the energy that corrupts, but the unconsciousness with which we approach it. Sexual energy, when understood only as lust, remains trapped in the lower chambers of the psyche, but when recognized for what it truly is, a source of life and creative power, it becomes something entirely different. It becomes fuel not only for physical union, but for all acts of creation, writing a poem, founding a movement, sculpting a life of meaning. This life force is not limited to artists or mystics. It is present in every human being, waiting to be claimed. The difference lies in how one relates to it. Some repress it, fearing its intensity. Others indulge it, losing themselves in its fire. But a third path exists, a path of conscious engagement where the individual does not fight the energy nor surrender blindly to it, but learns to harness it. To harness this energy is to become aware of it in its raw state. This awareness is not clinical. It is intimate, sometimes terrifying. It requires descending into the deeper layers of the self, the instinctual, the chaotic, the often repressed. Here lies the paradox. What we most often seek to avoid is what contains the most transformative power. The libido must be met where it lives, in the shadows of the psyche, before it can be transmuted. Children express this energy innocently in their play, their curiosity, their wild, unfiltered expressions. As we grow, social norms impose constraints. We are taught to control, suppress, redirect. Often this is done without understanding, leaving people cut off from their own inner vitality. But the libido does not disappear. It becomes restless, leaking out in neurosis, obsession, anxiety, or the haunting sense that one is not living fully. To reclaim it, one must reconnect with the core of being, that wellspring of vitality that predates any external identity. This reconnection is not a return to childish impulsivity, but a step toward integration. It is to take back what was lost or buried and make it conscious. When this energy is no longer feared or shamed, it begins to rise. It animates thought, deepens feeling, strengthens will. It becomes the creative fire at the center of a meaningful life. Every human being carries within them a hidden dimension, a side of the psyche that is not easily shown, not easily named, and often not even fully known. This hidden realm is the shadow, the collection of all the traits, desires, fears, and instincts that have been rejected, denied, or buried over time. It is formed not by evil, but by the act of exclusion. Whatever we are told we must not be, whatever is taboo, shameful, or socially unfit, is cast down into this underworld of the soul. Lust, raw and unapologetic, is among the first to be exiled. From early life, the child learns what is acceptable and what is not. Expressions of sexuality, of desire, of bodily curiosity are often met not with guidance but with judgment. The body becomes a source of embarrassment. Desire becomes dangerous. What was once a natural part of the self is split off, cast into the darkness of the unconscious. There, it does not die. It waits. The shadow does not disappear through denial. It deepens. And the more fiercely something is pushed down, the more powerfully it will later seek return. Repressed lust does not remain passive. It twists and warps, finding strange outlets. It may disguise itself as compulsive behavior, as addiction, as domination, or as self-loathing. It might surface not in acts of intimacy, but in ambition, in manipulation, in the need to possess. The energy of lust, when unacknowledged, does not grow quiet, it becomes cunning. It wears masks, hides in virtues, and often appears in those very places where we least expect to find it. A preacher's sermon, a politician's platform, even a therapist's advice, all can carry the ghost of unrecognized desire. This is not to say lust is inherently destructive. It is simply powerful, and power, when left in the dark, becomes dangerous. The shadow is not evil in itself. It becomes evil when left unintegrated. Unconscious lust breeds hypocrisy. A man who denies his own sexual hunger may begin to control others, moralize, or condemn. A woman who suppresses her erotic self may become frozen, bitter, or restless. But behind every judgment, every projection, every tight smile or rigid belief, there is often a disowned part of the self, still burning. To confront the shadow is to turn inward with honesty and courage. It is to recognize the parts of the self that one has learned to hate, to fear, or to hide. Lust, once faced without shame, reveals itself not as a perversion, but as a form of longing. A longing to connect, to dissolve boundaries, to feel alive. Its repression, then, is not merely moral, it is existential. In denying lust, one denies a part of the soul's fire, and that fire, denied, often burns behind the scenes in secrecy or shame. Culture plays a role in shaping the shadow. In societies where sexuality is overexposed but understood, the individual becomes confused. Desire is both glorified and punished. The body is commodified, and yet authentic intimacy is rare. Lust is made either into spectacle or sin, with little space for nuance. As a result, many walk through life split, with a polished surface and a hidden storm beneath it. The challenge is not to destroy the shadow, but to make peace with it. To bring light to those inner chambers where lust still waits in exile. This requires neither indulgence nor denial, but discernment, a willingness to listen to what this energy is asking for and why it has gone unheard for so long. The shadow is not the enemy of the self, it is the other half of the story. When lust is recognized not as shameful but as a signal, a deep voice from the underworld, it begins to speak more clearly. Transformation does not begin with effort, it begins with awareness. Not effort in the sense of striving to become something else, but the quiet effort of seeing what is. Awareness is the turning of the psyche's gaze inward, the moment when what has always moved in the shadows is illuminated, not judged, but witnessed. This act, though subtle, is revolutionary. Especially when applied to the realm of sexual energy, which has long been hidden, feared, or distorted within the collective and individual unconscious. To bring awareness to lust is not the same as indulging it. Awareness is not surrender, nor is it suppression. It is the middle path, the one that sees without flinching, without grasping, without turning away. The moment lust is observed clearly, it begins to change, not because it has been forced to, but because the gaze of consciousness reshapes whatever it touches. Just as sunlight transforms whatever lies beneath it, awareness alters the very chemistry of the psychic landscape. Most people live at the mercy of their inner energies. They are pushed and pulled by forces they barely understand. They act out desires they cannot name. They run from fears they refuse to face. Lust in its raw form is one of the most potent of these forces. But when it is met with clear attention, when one asks not just what the desire is, but why it arises, where it lives in the body, what wound it covers, what longing it points to, something opens. Often, what appears as sexual craving is not about union with another, but about reunion with the lost self. The body becomes the stage, but the play is psychological. Behind every fixation, there may be a deeper hunger for recognition, for wholeness, for transcendence. To become aware of this is to peel back the mask of lust and see the face of yearning beneath it. The transformation begins not by destroying the impulse, but by allowing it to speak truthfully. In dreams, desire often appears in symbolic forms: fire, animals, water, pursuit, hunger. The unconscious does not speak in rational language. It speaks in image, myth, and metaphor. Awareness involves learning to read these symbols, to understand what the psyche is trying to express through its wild, indirect vocabulary. A dream of forbidden intimacy, for instance, might point not to literal temptation, but to the denied parts of oneself crying out to be acknowledged. The act of interpretation, the act of seeing what the image represents, becomes the beginning of integration. True transformation is not about becoming someone better, but becoming more whole. That which was exiled is brought back. That which was scattered is gathered. And in this gathering, sexual energy is no longer isolated. It is woven into the greater pattern of life. It becomes available not only for physical connection, but for vision, creation, and communion with the deeper layers of reality. But awareness is not always comfortable. It may bring shame to the surface, or grief, or confusion. To truly see oneself, to stand naked before the mirror of the inner world, requires a kind of strength that few are taught to cultivate. It requires tenderness toward what is raw, and patience with what resists change. And yet it is this very confrontation, this quiet, unwavering attention to what one is, that begins the slow, alchemical process of transformation. In this light, sexual energy ceases to be an enemy or an embarrassment. It becomes a guide. Not a god to be worshipped, nor a demon to be cast out, but a force that, when understood, carries the potential to awaken deeper truths about the self and its place in the world. Through awareness, lust sheds its confusion and begins to reveal its hidden purpose. Deep in the architecture of the psyche dwell universal patterns, archetypes, which shape the way we experience life, longing, and the self. These are not roles we consciously choose, but ancient blueprints we are born into, emerging from the collective unconscious and coloring the fabric of our emotions, relationships, and aspirations. Among them, the lover stands as one of the most primal and misunderstood. Often reduced to mere sensuality or romance, the lover archetype holds within it a much more expansive reality, the hunger for beauty, depth, union, and the ecstatic experience of being fully alive. The lover is not confined to sexual expression. It is the part of the soul that longs to merge with a person, with nature, with music, with the divine. It is Eros in its full form, not just as erotic attraction, but as the connective tissue of the universe. Wherever there is deep passion, wherever there is the impulse to touch, to taste, to feel completely, the lover is awake. This archetype doesn't just want pleasure, it wants presence. It wants to dissolve boundaries and drink life with full intensity. But when undeveloped, the lover remains immature. It becomes fixated, needy, impulsive. It chases fleeting highs, fears separation, and confuses desire with devotion. In this stage, lust dominates, not because it is evil, but because it is unshaped. The lover, when stuck in its infancy, seeks fulfillment through others, always reaching outward, never rooted in its own depths. The result is often suffering, obsession, addiction, disappointment. The world cannot carry the burden of unintegrated longing. The path of growth requires that the lover not be denied, but transformed. This transformation occurs not by suppression, but through elevation, a movement from the outer object of desire to the inner source of creativity. As the lover matures, it gives birth to a new archetype, the creator. Where the lover seeks connection, the creator channels it. Where the lover is immersed in feeling, the creator gives form to feeling. The raw passion of Eros becomes the driving force behind poetry, music, invention, vision, and sacred work. This metamorphosis is not a rejection of desire, but its sublimation. The creator still loves, still longs, still feels, but no longer seeks completion outside itself. It has internalized the lover's yearning and redirected it toward a higher purpose. In this way, the same energy that once drove a person toward fleeting romance can become the energy that fuels a lifelong devotion to art, philosophy, innovation, or service. The creator builds temples out of longing, not in stone, but in meaning. This is why many of the greatest works of human achievement are born not from serenity, but from struggle, from the tension between desire and discipline, inspiration and limitation. The creator is forged in this tension. It understands the fire of the lover, but it does not burn blindly in it. It uses that fire to illuminate, to forge, to shape. The impulse to unite becomes the impulse to express. The hunger to possess becomes the capacity to reveal. Both the lover and the creator exist in everyone, regardless of gender, culture, or belief. They are not opposites, but stages of the same energy. The lover is the root, the raw, vital, emotional soil, while the creator is the fruit, the offering, the legacy. When the two are divided, one may burn with passion but lack direction, or create with skill but no soul. But when they are unified, there is a kind of sacred power. Work that is not just clever, but alive. Love that is not just consuming, but transformative. To encounter these archetypes within oneself is to recognize that desire is not an obstacle to growth, but its very fuel. The task is not to extinguish the inner lover, but to evolve it, to let it deepen until it flowers into the creator, capable of building not just pleasure, but meaning. Legacy is often mistaken for something external, a monument, a reputation, a name etched into the surface of history. But this outer residue is only a shadow of something deeper. True legacy does not begin in the world, it begins in the self. It is the echo of a person's inner life made visible, a crystallization of their journey toward wholeness. It is not simply what they achieved, but who they became, and what that becoming allowed them to give. In a fragmented world, we are taught to chase accomplishments as proofs of worth. We are encouraged to accumulate, to perform, to impress. But the soul does not speak in numbers or trophies. It speaks in symbols and the language of integration. It seeks coherence, not applause. And so a true legacy is not measured by what one amasses, but by how deeply one's outer life reflects the unity of the inner world. It is the visible trace of invisible work. When sexual energy, that raw creative force, is reclaimed and rechanneled, it begins to carve out this inner coherence. The once scattered desires, the suppressed instincts, the unresolved tensions are gradually gathered, acknowledged, and given a place. The result is not perfection, but wholeness. A psyche no longer at war with itself. From this integration arises a kind of authority, not the authority of domination, but the quiet authority of someone who has faced their depths and returned with something to offer. This offering becomes the seed of legacy, not in a self-conscious way, not through branding or performance, but as a natural consequence of living in alignment. When someone has brought their inner contradictions into dialogue, their presence alone begins to shape the world around them. What they create carries weight, what they say resonates. What they leave behind endures, not because it was engineered to last, but because it emerged from a place of truth. There is a difference between influence and imprint. Influence can be wide but shallow, popular but passing. Imprint is deep, and it often begins in silence. A person may not be remembered for the things they thought would matter, but for the moments when they were most themselves, the work that came from love, the courage to stand alone, the integrity to say no, the beauty they shaped without knowing who would see it. To reach this level of expression, one must first descend into the self, not as a retreat, but as a rite of passage. Legacy is not born from ambition alone. It is born from intimacy, with one's own pain, longing, contradictions, and gifts. This descent is not always noble. It may involve shame, confusion, rage, but it is precisely in facing these raw materials of the psyche that something begins to form, something textured, human, and whole. When a person does this inner work, their legacy becomes less about what they did and more about what they embodied. Many leave behind great structures, businesses, books, systems, but the ones that endure are those infused with soul, not surface polish but depth, not cleverness but contact with something essential. A poem written from a place of spiritual clarity will outlast 1,000 works designed to please the crowd. A gesture of kindness, grounded in real presence, can ripple through generations. To live in such a way is to live symbolically. Every act, every word becomes a carrier of meaning. The person no longer acts to impress, but to express, not to win, but to reveal. The shape of their life begins to match the shape of their inner world. There is no longer a division between what they feel and what they do, between the energy they carry and the imprint they leave behind. Transformation is not a straight line. It is a spiral, a descent before ascent, a movement inward before expression outward. And at the heart of all true transformation lies a mystery as old as the human soul, the mystery of alchemy. Not the alchemy of lead into literal gold, but the psychological and spiritual process by which the densest, most instinctual parts of the self are transmuted into light, clarity, and creative power. Sexual energy, often dismissed as merely biological or indulgent, is one of the most potent raw materials for this inner work. It is the prima materia, the chaotic, molten substance that must be refined through fire, through pressure, through conscious attention. To undergo alchemy is to enter a crucible. The self is not simply improved. It is dissolved, purified, and restructured. The ego, with its fixed identities and defenses, must loosen its grip so that something deeper can emerge. This process is not clean. It is not neat. It is deeply human, full of paradox, struggle, and awakening. Lust, when engaged unconsciously, keeps the psyche tethered to repetition, cycles of craving, regret, and hunger for something undefined. But when that same energy is brought into the alchemical vessel of awareness, intention, and discipline, it begins to evolve. The early stages of this process are often marked by confusion. The individual begins to sense that the things which once brought pleasure no longer satisfy. Old patterns feel hollow. There may be an urge to withdraw, to question everything: relationships, habits, identity itself. This is the nigrido phase, the blackening, when the old self begins to disintegrate. It is a descent into shadow, into discomfort, but it is necessary. Enu. Without decay, there can be no rebirth. Without the breakdown of illusions, the truth cannot be seen. As the process deepens, energy begins to shift. What was once expressed outward through lust, consumption, or distraction is now turned inward. This is not repression. It is containment. And the inner fire, no longer leaking out through unconscious impulses, begins to build pressure. It cooks the psyche from within. This is the albedo, the whitening, a stage of purification, clarity, and new vision. Sexual energy is felt not as tension but as vitality. Desire no longer demands gratification, it seeks understanding. The body becomes not an object of shame or control, but a vessel of awareness. Eventually, something new begins to take form, a self that is not ruled by instinct, but enriched by it. The soul begins to integrate what was once fragmented. Inner opposites, masculine and feminine, desire and restraint, body and spirit, are no longer at war. They enter into dialogue. This is the libido, the reddening, the stage of embodiment and creation. The energy that once drove one to possess now becomes the energy to give. The same fire that once consumed becomes the light that illuminates. In this way, the journey from lust to legacy is nothing less than alchemical. It is not a moral path, but a symbolic one. It is not about purity in the conventional sense, but about wholeness, the ability to hold complexity without being broken by it. Sexual energy, when transmuted, becomes more than just desire. It becomes purpose, clarity, vision. It flows through art, leadership, intimacy, and silence. It is no longer scattered. It is directed. But alchemy is not a one-time event. It is a lifetime's work. Each new phase of growth brings fresh material to be worked with, fresh shadows to be integrated, fresh flames to be tended. The psyche is a living system, always evolving, always breaking and reforming. What matters is not to arrive at perfection, but to stay within the process, to remain in relationship with one's inner fire, to keep refining, shaping, and becoming.